I have a question. What if? What if the thing that you believe is holding you back is actually preparing you for something greater? What if your setbacks were not signs to stop, but signs to push forward? What if in this moment right here, it wasn't the moment that you gave up, but the moment that you decided to stand up? And I want you to let those questions sit with you, because I lived them, not just once, but over and over again. And my answers didn't come in a moment of clarity. They came in motion, in chaos, and in unexpected places. All right, now I want you to picture this. The roar of roller skates on the track, the force of a hit sending someone to the floor, the rush of getting back up before the next impact. That was my world in roller derby. Did you picture something like that? Okay, now picture a corporate boardroom. Calm, controlled, strategic. Decisions that shape an organization's future happening in real time. That is my world in my career today. And you might picture something like this. Now, these two places seem to be worlds apart. But everything that I learned in roller derby, adaptability, resilience, and strategy, prepared me for leadership in ways that I never expected. Now, my story, though, it didn't start in a way that suggested I would ever make it here. And by all accounts, I probably shouldn't be standing in this spot today. See, I grew up in a home where financial stability was a distant dream. College wasn't really something we talked about. And anxiety, that was something that I assumed that I had to live with. But here's the truth that I've learned. Where you start does not define where you're going to end up. And your circumstances, they do not dictate your future. See, I grew up in a home that was constantly unstable. My parents divorced when I was 5. I rarely saw my father. And when he left and started a new family and had 3 sons, I convinced myself that he replaced me. Then, when I was 14, my mother left me too. She left me with my stepdad, and when she moved, she didn't take me with her. Now, I chose to stay where I was because I wanted to go to the same school, but I still felt like I had been left behind. And I started to truly believe that I wasn't good enough and that I wasn't worth staying around for. By high school, because of all this, I was battling crippling anxiety. Though at the time, I had no idea what that was. All I knew was I felt like I was holding my breath. Some days I was so nervous I would shake or be too nauseous to function. And that crippling anxiety really affected my education. At 17, I graduated from high school, but not with awards and accolades. I graduated towards the bottom of my class, just barely getting by. After high school, I did what I thought I was supposed to do, and I worked. College was not on my radar, and I had no professionals in my life to look up to. So I found a job in retail, and I moved forward the only way I knew how, just getting by. But then I met my amazing husband a few years later, and at 23, we were married. Now, this is something that usually evokes a sense of excitement for your future, but our marriage started off with distance and that sense of abandonment for me all over again. Because I decided to marry an active duty Marine, and 2 weeks after we tied the knot, he deployed, leaving me home alone and giving birth to our daughter without him. During that time, I was also diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. This had my anxiety at an all-time high. I felt alone, I felt scared, and I had no idea how to navigate life as a new mom and a military spouse. So after a few years, 3 very long deployments, and a whole lot more anxiety, I finally found an outlet. And in 2012, my world changed forever because I found roller derby. Or maybe roller derby found me. Now, for those of you that don't know, roller derby is a full contact sport played on roller skates, where 2 teams race around the track, and they use strategy, speed, and physicality to score points and block opponents. It's fast, it's intense, and it's unapologetically tough. You learn to take hits and get back up over and over again. Now, the first time I laced up my skates, I had no idea that roller derby was about to teach me some of the most important lessons of my life. Because roller derby taught me resilience in the most literal way. Because when you get knocked down in this sport, you don't get to sit on the floor and think about it. You have to get back up immediately. because the game keeps moving. I learned that falling wasn't failing, it was just a part of the process. And the more that I played, the more that I started to notice something. The anxiety that had ruled my life for years, it wasn't there during a game. Because the game had forced me to be present, to react in real time, and to trust myself. Roller derby made me very strong, but life still had hits that I wasn't prepared for. And in 2017, my world shattered. One of my closest friends, a woman who I care so deeply about, she took her own life. She had struggled with instability and a deep sense of hopelessness. And I remember thinking that that could have been me. But then I thought, maybe I could have done something more for her. Maybe I could have helped her in some way. And that guilt was so heavy. At that same time, my stepfather, the one who'd been in my life for nearly 18 years, left my mother. She was in her 50s, struggling to get by, working 2 jobs with no financial security. For me, watching these 2 women in my life who I loved so much, one who was lost to despair, and the other who was struggling to rebuild in her 50s, it made me realize something in that moment. I have a choice. I cannot control my past, and I cannot undo all of the loss, but I could take control of my future. So a few months later, I did something I never thought I would do. At 32, after barely graduating high school, I enrolled in college. Thank you. I'm going to say that line again. I did something I never thought I would do, and I enrolled in college. At 32, after barely graduating high school, I logged into a classroom for the first time, determined to build a different future. And for the first time, I was not just getting by, I was thriving. But see, thriving didn't mean just pushing through. It meant learning that I had to take control of my mind and my emotions and my fears. But I had experienced so much trauma in my life, more than I can even explain here today, and anxiety has always been a constant. It dictated my choices, it held me back, and it made me feel powerless. After a few years, all of the loss and anxiety caught up with me. And that's the thing about trauma. You can experience something horrific, and then a few years later, out of nowhere, it can hit you all over again. Sometimes it hits you even worse than it did the first time. My world was unraveling with daily panic attacks and anxiety. I could not function. I was having a panic attack every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, and couldn't leave my house. My only source of comfort was in my best friend. She would sit on the phone with me for hours and walk me through a panic attack. She did everything that she could to try and help me take control of my mind and my emotions. After about a month or so, she finally said, "Lyndsay, you need to get help." And in that moment, I made a decision. I have to fight for my mental health the same way that I have fought for everything else in my life. And so I started therapy. And for the first time, I had someone who could name exactly what I had been dealing with all along: generalized anxiety, panic disorder, OCD tendencies, and an overwhelming fear of loss. But here's what changed everything. I did not just sit in therapy and talk about my feelings. I did the work. I read every book that my therapist recommended on anxiety and mental resilience. I practiced mindfulness, breathwork, and journaling daily. I prayed, and I found so much comfort in my faith. I started to separate myself from my anxious thoughts. So instead of believing this fear is real, I started telling myself, that is anxiety talking, and you don't have to listen. I then created routines that helped me feel safe and in control. And most importantly, I did not give up on myself. Now, at first, the progress was slow, and some days I still felt like I was drowning. But then something incredible happened. I started to win. Now, these wins might not be significant to some people, but for me, they were everything. I could go to the grocery store without panic creeping in. I could let my kids be kids without obsessing over their safety. and I could wake up in the morning without fear being the very first thing that I felt. Now, anxiety didn't disappear overnight, but it lost its grip on me. And I learned that anxiety wasn't proof that I was weak. It was proof that I have something to fight for. And so I started making different choices. I thrived in college. This time, my education did have me earning awards and accolades. And after I got my degree, I took a job in marketing, a field I was so passionate about. And I started applying the same adaptability that I did on the track, adjusting, pivoting, and learning as I went, and it worked. And I climbed my way from being an intern to a marketing executive in just a few years. And in 2024, I made my own dreams come true, and I became a chief marketing officer. But let me be clear, the anxiety never disappeared. I still face it. I'm literally facing it right now. I'm freaking out a little bit. But I no longer let it define me. And here's what I've learned. Resilience is not about never struggling. It's about knowing that that struggle doesn't have to be the end of your story. And I also learned that my circumstances, the way I grew up, and the things that I experienced, they didn't dictate my future. The choices that I made did. Today, I have a strong, loving marriage and a partnership built on trust and shared dreams. My husband has been my rock, supporting me through every setback and every victory. Together, we've built a home built on laughter and love. And I have two amazing kids who get to see what it looks like to push through fear and panic attacks, to take risks and to not let the past define them. They get to see a mother who once doubted herself and is now standing on this stage with confidence. They get to see a mother who fought for her future and in doing so created something beautiful for them. Today, I have an amazing relationship with my dad, my mom, my step-parents, and all of my siblings. And when I would look around at this life that I've built, the home that I've created, and the moments of pure joy, I know that one thing is certain. None of this was inevitable. None of this was guaranteed. This life, the career, the home, the love, the family, it was built. It was built through resilience, through choices, and through refusing to let my circumstances dictate my future. Today, I'm still married to an active duty Marine who deploys. He deploys next week, actually. I still have an autoimmune disease. I have two now. I still feel the guilt of losing my friend, and I still feel the hurt of being left behind sometimes. But those things, they no longer get to tell me who I am. Instead, what they do is they tell me that I have overcome 100% of the hard things in my life. You know how I know I've overcome them? Because I'm right here. But that also means that you have also overcome 100% of the hard things in your life, because you're right there. Now I want to ask you again, what if? What if the thing that you believe is holding you back is actually preparing you for something greater? What if your setbacks were not signs to stop, but signs to push forward? Maybe you're facing something that feels impossible, the loss of a loved one, a dream that feels out of reach, or anxiety that just won't let you go. But what if in this moment right here, it wasn't the moment that you gave up, but the moment that you decided to stand up? Because if I can rewrite my story, if I can go from being powerless to leading with confidence, if I can do that, so can you. Because that next step that you're afraid to take, it could lead you to a place that you never imagined. Thank you.